one thing that NCAA athletes now are dealing with, and these coaches, there's been, Eric and I get to say like back when I played, is this new thing called
there.
I know,
we're right there.
Eric's a little older than me. So, but the NCAA transfer portal. So back in the day when you played, Eric, let's say you were mad and you didn't like playing at Nebraska. When you wanted to leave, there was like this huge process. Like the coach had to give you like permission to leave. And then if you got rejected there, then you had to ask like, the next layer. But then like if you transferred to another school, you had to sit out a year, right? That's how it was back when, back when you played. So they had this new thing that started back in 2018 called the NCAA transfer portal. And basically it was created really as a compliance tool. So for those of you that don't know, there's this entire department at all colleges called the compliance department. And they basically are in charge of all the rules and regulations. And they want to make sure that you don't become ineligible as an athlete. So this transfer portal really was designed to help with, with compliance when athletes, wanted to leave. And so a student athlete, these days now will go to their compliance administrator and ask for their name to be placed in this transfer portal. And then the school has 2 business days to submit the information. So you guys hear like breaking news, so-and-so athlete has entered the transfer portal. I think they make it sound like it's this like super exotic thing, but really it's just, some technicalities, I think, in the computer. But
like free agency.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. But the downside of it is that if a student athlete enters the transfer portal, the school that they're going to can reduce or stop giving them their scholarship money. So their athletic aid can end at the term if the request was made to enter this portal. Like, was this a good thing, a bad thing, just a technicality?
Well, I see both sides. I think it could be a good thing for players that, aren't going to get the opportunity to play. Because I think that at the end, it's like, if you're a competitor, you know that you can play or believe in yourself and you want to work hard enough and you want to play, you can play. And you can probably find a place. So I think in regards to the portal, that's a good thing. The unfortunate thing, I think the bad thing is, you enter the portal and it's not guaranteed you're going to get a scholarship or end up somewhere. So, there are some risks with entering that portal, and you may not have a scholarship after you enter it. So I think, that's tough. But, I also think that, I've heard people comment about, what's so bad about, waiting your turn or, working hard and earning the spot there. And I do believe that sometimes, you may recruit 4 quarterbacks that are all D1 starters. You're going to have a problem probably, and so
which
guys
is great for a coach.
Yeah, it's great for
right?
a coach. Like, hey, you did a great job recruiting, or you got a great program, or your, offense is rolling. That's awesome. But all those guys want to play. And so you probably have to kind of stagger your, recruiting that top guy, but then that's tough because you don't know, guy gets hurt, you got to have a guy ready. So, there's a lot of thought that goes into this for coaches when recruiting's there. And a lot of them now, I think it's the bad thing is it may be hurting high school recruiting. So, you've got this big portal and guys maybe have played for 1, 2, 3 years.
They jump ship.
We need a QB right now. And this guy's played 3 years already at the college level. Let's grab him and maybe not offer that kid that we're going to offer that scholarship to in high school. So I think it's hurting the high school recruits.
Yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons to it. I tried to find some stats about the transfer portal and like, how many athletes really do this, because I know when Scott came in, Scott Frost came in Nebraska, it wasn't his guys when he came in, and we've seen a huge amount of guys leaving, entering the transfer portal. And, Scott kind of said, sometimes if there's termites in the wood, I mean, maybe it's not a bad thing all the time. Sometimes there's athletes that, it's just not a good fit. So I'm with you. There's pros and cons, but I looked up some stats in 2018, 2019, in that academic year, there was 302,000 Division I and Division II student athletes, and 15,000 of them had entered their names in the transfer portal. And of those 15,000, 10,000 were trying to transfer from a Division I school where portal use was required, and 5,000 were attempting to transfer actually down to a D2 school. So, there might be athletes that are like, oh, hey, look, I'm not going to get any playing time. I'd like to transfer down to a D2 school where I'm like the starting quarterback. And that's a good thing for that athlete, to have a more well-rounded collegiate experience. But of the 10,000 athletes that entered the portal, 25% were football players, and 50% of Division I football players in the portal were walk-ons. So these are people who are not even receiving financial aid, but they were likely seeking scholarships from other schools. So I think there's pros and cons. And at the end of the day, every athlete has to do, what's best for themselves. But as sexy as the transfer portal sounds, it really was just kind of like a compliance thing, because back in the day, I mean, they had to do things on paper. Like I get to say back when I was in medical school and residency, we did paper charts. I mean, there was a lot of paperwork involved for athletes to transfer back then. Of course, they've streamlined it so much more to make that process easier. And of course, now it comes with, a few less penalties. So, all right. Okay. So the other thing, big news in NCAA sports is this name, image, likeness. This new NCAA rule went all the way to the Supreme Court. So when Eric and I played, we couldn't profit off our name, image, and likeness. And these days, depending which state you live in, and it's rapidly changing fast, you can now profit. What are your thoughts about this? It's weird to imagine maybe what it would have been like, if they had it back when you played.
Well, I think the positives are that, look, we all wanted to have a little bit more cash in our pockets when we were in college. We couldn't really work. We couldn't really have as a college athlete, you really can't hold a job. I mean, you got 2 full-time jobs, right?
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
no
you just,
time. There's no
when are you
extra
going to do
time.
this? How are you going to do it? You can't. And, the guys that were fortunate enough to have scholarships, pay for their education was awesome. And, you come out mostly debt-free, which is really cool and helpful. And I'm not sure, totally where I stand. I mean, I support it, but I'm still unsure on how it's going to affect the experience in college. I did like the purity of, amateur sports, and I think we're still going to see that, but I do believe that we're going to experience some things like, it's going to not hurt recruiting, but recruiting.
It's going to change the recruiting game.
Yeah, because offers of, hey, if we do this, you'll get this. It's almost like now you got to have deals on the tables for guys coming in, so that they know, hey, when I get there, you got this deal for me.
Right.
So, you're going to be doing deals in high school for where you're going in college.
Yeah, I think it brings up a lot of legal, ethical, moral, I mean, whatever you want to call it. But, there's already all these NCAA rules about recruitment and not, as soon as you're, 7th or 8th grade, you can't just be like hanging around college. You're eligible for recruitment. And there's all these rules that are, made to protect athletes. And I'm with you. I think it really puts some strange things on the table. I had heard Nebraska had like a department, basically. Now you're kind of like assigned a social media manager. Is that have you heard this?
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. I mean, I think schools are starting to do that because it's like, same thing. You say, oh, this huge athlete, I really want them here. Hey, listen, Joe Smith, when you come, we're going to assign you this person. They're going to help you really ramp up your social media presence. And that's how you can monetize. I do think that it adds kind of this, other layer of recruiting.
Branding is going to be like what schools, have relationships with what brands,
right?
And how players look at that. Do they like Nike coming out of high school and, hey, I got to go to a school that has a Nike gear?
But then where's the conflict of interest? Like Nebraska's an Adidas school, and let's say Nike or Under Armour comes after one of their athletes, what is the legal obligation? Like what if there's a conflict of interest in a brand that the athlete's trying to represent or support versus the university? I think there could be
Adrian Martinez wearing Nike shoes during a game,
he's got like an Adidas jersey
sponsor.
on and Nike shoes, and where do you draw the line? And I just, from a contractual basis, who actually has a leg to stand on, as far as what an athlete could or could not represent. But it's interesting. So the NCAA basically announced a policy that athletes could get paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness. And there are a few states that have these NIL laws, and Nebraska, of course, was one of them that came to the table first. And now I think there's like close to 20 states. So like the first to the table were Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Kentucky, Missouri, and Nebraska. And I saw something I'm big on social media now. I think it would be interesting to think about back when I was a collegiate athlete. One of my other concerns is I know how much time my YouTube and my podcast and really just even managing my Instagram. I really don't have a lot of people that help me. I literally do it myself, and I have a full-time job as an OBGYN. I'm a mom of 3, and I know how much time it takes to do that. And I am concerned that when you start putting that sort of pressure on a collegiate student athlete, I mean, softball, we were a sport that missed the most days in the classroom of any sport, us and baseball, because you're constantly playing midweek games, much different than football where you might only play 11 games on a Saturday, right? And you're not missing, that much class. It's hard as a student athlete when you're missing that much school to maintain good grades. And that's my concern, I think, is that, it's really going to take away focus and attention from this young, naive 18-year-old who is trying to train at a level they've never trained at and trying to maintain their grades. I mean, that's one of my biggest concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think how I would feel if a player on the team was making $1 million and I was working. You feel like, hey, I'm
Jealousy
working just as
issues. Yeah.
hard as it's like great, they got the deal, awesome. But is that gonna create something in the locker room that can,
Right. Interesting.
tear? The simplest things can tear the locker room apart. So it'll be interesting to see how those players handle that. That, and look, I mean, you grow up a little bit now too, because you do have to. I was just talking about this today. Got asked before we jumped on this podcast, but like, is it going to make them work harder because they know if they work harder, then maybe they can be that guy that gets that contract? Is this what they needed to like motivate them? It's a different time, a different type of motivation. I mean, name, image, likeness is bigger than it's ever been before, obviously with the cell phone, and your name, image, likeness on your social media is a brand. It's your brand, and people are already kind of creating that. And so I don't think it's a big deal to them as much as it is probably to us who never had that or never grew up with, branding ourselves to the public.
Right.
So it's hard for us to understand.
Yeah, it makes me think too about the recruiting process. When I was trying to be recruited as a collegiate softball player, my mom literally compiled these VHS tapes of my practices and games. Literally, I'll never forget that. She went and made 50 copies of this VHS and stuck it in a manila envelope with a letter, that I wrote to the coaches and signed. I mean, that's how recruiting was done back, when we played. And these days, you're right. This is like social media is their jam. Like that's what they do. And that's honestly probably how they get, seen by, I'm sure each recruiting department at these colleges is kind of like looking at the social media because it is a great way to kind of brand yourself before you even get there. But of course, there's a flip to every coin, and athletes have to be super careful about what they put on their social media because every coach is looking at it.
Yeah.
And, if you put things on there that aren't going to represent the school well, that could definitely hurt your recruiting too. So I don't know. It's going to be super interesting to see, how this plays out. And I saw on Instagram the other day, I don't know if you follow Barstool Sports, like they're a big social media account in the athlete world, but they were signing athletes. This girl, I don't remember where she was playing, but she reached out to them and she's like, will you be my social media agent? And they were like, sure, we don't even know what that is, but we're going to sign you. So then there was this huge, over 24 hours, they had signed 11 different athletes across all sports, men and women, to kind of be their social media agent. And so it's interesting that athletes might use certain platforms that have millions of followers to kind of boost that. Yeah. And it's just going to be so interesting to see how this plays out.